They were the reigning queens of Hollywood. One was a veteran of silent films who epitomized glamour as she reinvented herself time and time again. The other was a stage-trained performer who, though haughty and strong-willed, became one of the most respected actresses of all time. Both worked for a while at the same studio, then later teamed for a horror film that would revitalize their fading careers. Together, they had a relationship that is Hollywood legend. They are Joan Crawford and Bette Davis, two of the most famous Hollywood rivals. Hollywood's a tough town, and you often can't tell your friends from your enemies. Smiles are served up daily, even when some folks are putting a knife into your back. Whether friendly or hostile, competition is the name of the game in Tinseltown. These are the stories of talent pitted against each other, of careers that crossed paths when stars were rising or falling back down to earth. These are the tales seldom told about the drama behind the scenes and the explosive confrontations in front of the camera. Sometimes these Hollywood rivalries are denied by the parties involved. Such was the case with Joan Crawford and Bette Davis, neither of whom ever admitted to any kind of enmity. But when these two talents met, it was anything but hugs and kisses. Bette Davis wasn't much for making friends with fellow female stars. "I never did pal around with actresses," she stated. "Their talk usually bored me to tears." In fact, Bette once said about her illustrious rival, "The best time I ever had with Joan in a film was when I pushed her down the stairs in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane." Joan Crawford was born Lucille Fay LeSueur in San Antonio, Texas on March 23, 1904. As the girl developed into a beautiful young woman, showbiz aspirations filled her head, just as they would for young Bette Davis a few years later. Davis, though, would make a name for herself acting on Broadway. Joan's stage experience was limited to being a showgirl. She made her first film in 1925, the silent picture Lady of the Night, which starred Norma Shearer. She spent the rest of the decade appearing in silent movies, sometimes under the name Lucille LeSueur, and working with some of the biggest names in Hollywood at the time. In Tramp, 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 she was the love interest of baby-faced comic Harry Langdon. And in The Unknown, she beguiled Lon Chaney's armless knife thrower. But it was Joan's performance as a flapper in the 1928 film Our Dancing Daughters that finally caught the public's attention. At this time, Bette Davis was playing on Broadway. Little did she realize that in a few short years, she would be competing with Joan for the title Queen of Hollywood. But Joan was determined to be an even bigger star, and nothing was going to stand in her way. She started to gain a reputation for being difficult and a bit arrogant, as would Davis in future years, and often displayed jealousy towards other actresses on the set. Silent screen star Anita Page remembers how her mother quickly quelled a developing friendship with Joan Crawford.
Now, Crawford was a little different. I mean, she was, we got along on the whole. I mean, you know, but in fact, she wanted me to go and have dancing lessons with her. But my mother had seen something that she didn't quite approve of, so she didn't want me to do it. So she just explained that we were busy moving in and so on, which we were. And so that was that. I mean, because I don't know what it was that my mother saw, but she went into the little bathroom after Crawford had been there, and then after I'd been there too. But she, all of a sudden, I think she might have let me go with Joan, but all of a sudden she changed her mind, so maybe she saw something that she didn't like, and so that was that. I mean, she never told me what it was. I mean, no, my mother was very kind, and she didn't want to spread anything, but she just, you know, just said, "No, honey." So that was that.
Joan had no problem making the transition from silence to talkies at the end of the 1920s.
You see, I came home from the dance with it hidden under my wrap for fear someone would take it from me.
Well, Joan, if we weren't such good friends, I'd say...
You'd say what?
I won't say it.
Oh, Bill. If you'd wanted something all your life and fate laid it right in your path, what would you do?
Grab it and run like...
Mm-hmm.
Like you did. But you'll have to take it back.
No, I'll never take it back.
Oh, yes, you will. Come on, hand it over.
Who are you?
Inspector Kane, I heard what you said. You stole Miss Shearer's jewels.
Jewels? Oh, you're crazy. Here's what I took.
After the jazz singer, sound pictures were the talk of the town. Many silent performers saw their careers end because their voices could not make the grade.
Everybody go home until further notice. What is this?
Yeah, what's the matter, R.F.?
The jazz singer. That's what's the matter, the jazz singer.
Oh, my darling little mammy. Now, little mammy. Now, your little baby.
No, this is no joke, Cosmo. It's a sensation. The public is screaming for more.
More what?
Talking pictures, talking pictures.
Oh, it's just a freak.
Yeah, what a freak. We should have such a freak at this studio.
Studios shipped in stage actors from New York to shape into new motion picture stars. One of these was Bette Davis, a Broadway sensation. She was born Ruth Elizabeth Davis on April 5, 1908, in Lowell, Massachusetts. Her mother encouraged her interest in performing, and young Davis took classes both in acting and dance. In 1929, she made her New York stage debut in a play entitled The Earth Between. Positive reviews led to more roles, and soon the actress had made a name for herself on Broadway. In 1930, she signed a contract with Universal Studios and moved with her mother to Hollywood. Bette always stayed close to her mother, unlike Joan, who was very independent and needed only the company of the male sex. Though Davis also had her trouble with men, rumors always abounded about Crawford's love life. But she usually had a good comeback ready. Once she stated, "Recently I heard a wise guy story that I had a party at my home for 25 men. It's an interesting story, but I don't know 25 men I'd want to invite to a party." It might have been difficult to find 25 men who had not already been there.
And remember the guy in Chicago and the guy in New York? Man, a lot of guys have looked at me.
You're a vile, sorry little tramp.
Davis's first film was 1931's Bad Sister, where she and Humphrey Bogart lent support to Sidney Fox. Like Joan, Betty's debut in films went virtually unnoticed. She did not make a lasting impression in this or any of her other pictures at Universal. Davis was up for the role of Elizabeth in Frankenstein, but was nixed by executives after they viewed her screen test. Their mean-spirited comments about her looks were typical of the disrespect Davis received early in her career. Joan Crawford, meanwhile, was getting the respect of audiences everywhere, but not from MGM. One of Hollywood's top stars of the 30s, she appeared in an impressive number of films. In Grand Hotel, she was part of a talented cast that included Greta Garbo and John and Lionel Barrymore. Rain cast her as a South Seas island bad girl who becomes the focus of obsessive holy man Walter Houston.
Righto, Sadie, I'm sorry I can't stay for lunch, but I'm off. But I hope I'll see you again sometime because you're a good kid and I like you.
I'll tell you what you do. You write me a nice little loving postcard, will you?
Righto, a nice little postcard.
And once you write it, just drop it in the ocean.
Well, bye-bye.
Hello.
Hello,
Sayonara.
I'm off.
Dancing Lady was one of the films teaming her with #1 male star and king of Hollywood, Clark Gable. They would be paired for a number of pictures and were even rumored to be carrying on an affair off-screen as well. Bette Davis made it clear years later that she was never impressed with Joan's abilities as an actress. She was quoted as saying, "Joan always cries a lot. Her tear ducts must be close to her bladder." Impressive work from the actress could be found in such films as I Live My Life, where she fell in love with archaeologist Brian Ahern.
You love me, Kay.
Stop being silly.
I have stopped. And it's about time you stopped, too.
Terry, the mere fact that we're male and female isn't enough. I kissed you because I wanted to kiss you. Maybe it was on account of the moon, and maybe it was for laughs. I don't know, I've forgotten. There it was, I kissed you. But I didn't kiss you with a marriage license in my pocket. Then you put on an act about people living your life for you. Maybe that's what should have happened to you a long time ago. Then maybe you'd be a little more normal. You haven't got claustrophobia, Terry. You're just plain nuts. And it's my life. And I'll live it the way I want. Upside down, catty-corner, or sliding down a pole.
In the romantic Love on the Run, Joan was an heiress pursued by reporters Clark Gable and Franchot Tone. Tone was another frequent co-star whom Joan actually fell in love with and eventually married.
He wanted me for myself, did he? Only I had to buy him in the bargain. Well, I'd buy his whole Russian swamp if I was sure he didn't go with it. That's what I'd do. You can tell him that.
And you can tell his uncles and his aunts and his sisters and his cousins and... Who are you?
The Bride Wore Red also featured Tone in the tale of a girl working her way up in society.
Do you really like me that much?
Now, don't misunderstand me, please. You and I live in quite different worlds. But I'm in the mood to meddle with fate tonight. Supposing I were to send you for 2 weeks to mingle with the men and women of my world.
You think everything I said and did that day was for a purpose?
It must have been. I know what was in the telegram.
But I love you now.
Be as cheap as you like, but not about that anymore. It's not our love now, nor yours. It's only mine.
I want you to marry her, and I want my love to haunt you. To make you lie awake at night. To burn your heart. To make you sick with pain. I want you to think of me and to ache for me. I want never to see you again.
Joan's character in Mannequin was similar, with the actress playing a noble woman who attracts the eye of Spencer Tracy.
I know that I'm about a month ahead of things if I follow the rules, but I don't want to follow the rules. I'm old enough to know what I want. You. And when I want it. Now.
Despite the attention Joan received for these parts, she yearned for deeper, more meaningful roles. She knew she was better than her material and wished MGM would make wiser use of her talents. Her part as the other woman in the classic 1939 drama The Women might be her best role from the 30s, yet it still did not change the path of her career at the studio.
Hey, what happened to hot steak you had on for tonight, darling? It's hotter than ever, dear. I'm having him dine at my place. About time he found out I was a home girl. Home girl? Get her. Why don't you borrow the quintuplets for these? Because I'm all the baby he wants, pet.
Bette Davis had long tired of Universal, and by 1932 had switched over to Warner Brothers. Mentor George Arliss convinced the studio to take a chance on the actress and cast her with him in The Man Who Played God. The studio liked her in it, and audiences began to take notice. Unfortunately, the next 14 films she did for Warner's were undistinguished and forgettable. But in 1934, she appeared opposite Leslie Howard in the searing drama of Human Bondage. Howard plays a crippled medical student who becomes obsessed with commoner waitress Davis.
Well, I see your friend's going.
I don't know what you mean.
I was referring to the nobleman with the sandy moustache. Has he left you for another?
Some people would do better to mind their own business.
Why? You have a very nice back. Am I on speaking terms with your back? Woman, you know. You can tell by the pelvis.
And that calls himself a gentleman.
She proceeds to make his life miserable. Davis's reviews were incredible, and she was now a bona fide star. She was given more important assignments and much more respect. Strong-willed and courageous, Davis became a force to be reckoned with. Though she was not nominated for her performance in Of Human Bondage, she did win the Best Actress Oscar for Dangerous in 1935.
Wish I'd never seen you. Never kissed you, never held you. Because every time I do, I hate myself. I hate you. I could kill every emotion except the desire to hold you just once more.
Where is it?
I don't know.
You're a liar.
No.
Give me the key.
I hadn't got it. Oh, my dear.
Leave me alone.
My dear.
During this film, Davis developed a crush on co-star Franchot Tone, but he was madly in love with Joan Crawford at the time.
Because I'm all the baby he wants.
Tone and Crawford would meet every day for lunch, and afterwards Franchot would return to the set with his face covered in lipstick. Years later, Davis admitted to being jealous, an experience that most likely began any competitive feeling she had toward her fellow star.
I hate everything about you.
In 1936, Betty re-teamed with Leslie Howard and Humphrey Bogart for the adaptation of the hit play The Petrified Forest.
Well, if you must know, I'll tell you the extent of my pride. Gabrielle gave me this dollar.
You did?
It's none of your business.
Would you like to know what she was going to give me when those rats showed up? Would you like to know?
Well, speaking of rats, of all the low, slimy, stinky...
Now, Gabrielle, now, you mustn't blame Bose. You must remember he's a man of muscle.
The film was a huge success, but Davis did not like the confines of the studio system. She openly defied Warner Brothers by traveling to England to make a film there. They successfully sued her, yet she was treated with more respect upon her return home. Davis was now the reigning queen of Warner Brothers, something that could not have been lost on Joan Crawford. Davis's winning streak continued to the end of the decade with Dark Victory. Perhaps her definitive role, the film cast the actress as a spoiled society girl surrounded by hopeful suitors. But her carefree life is turned upside down when she learns she is dying.
There's been no one but you. I had to come and tell you. No one. I've been so stupid. I've crammed every minute so full of waste.
But I love you, Julie.
I know you do. I'm not in your care any longer.
You'll always be in my care.
Will I?
I know how you'll feel. Anything to strike back at me. But don't do it this way.
What do you want me to do? Stay alone in my room and think how in a few months...
Judith, you hate me, don't you?
Oh, I hate you so much and for so many reasons. I hate you for not telling me the truth. I hate you for letting me hurl myself at your head. I'm so ashamed.
Jezebel was another hit for the star. In this period piece, Davis portrayed a Southern belle who ruins her own chance for romantic happiness with handsome Henry Fonda.
You're part of it, Press. And it's part of you. Like I am. You can't get away from us, Press. We're both in your blood.
Julie, please.
And we'll never let you go. To plan. To fight. But you can't fight marriage. Marriage, is it? To that washed-out little Yankee. Press is mine. Evidently, you've made up your mind.
No, Julie. You've made up my mind.
Well, then, goodbye, Press.
Betty received her second Academy Award for her performance, though many, including Davis herself, considered it a consolation prize for not winning the coveted role of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. Crawford, like every other actress in Hollywood, had also yearned for the role, but was turned down for being too hard-looking. As the 30s ended and the 40s began, both Joan and Betty continued working at the top of their form. Davis shined in The Letter, playing a respected wife who murders her lover, then pleads self-defense.
I swear I didn't write it.
It's difficult to prove that.
Howard, I swear to you I did not write this letter.
Do you love me?
Yes, I do. Every time I met him, I hated myself. Yet I lived for the moment when I'd see him again. You've been watching me all evening.
I'm responsible for you.
Because I'm so evil.
She was also great in the melodrama The Little Foxes, which placed her in the center of a shifty Southern family.
Alexandra is not getting married tomorrow, but she is going to Baltimore tomorrow. So let's talk about that.
Betty even displayed comic skills in the uproarious The Man Who Came to Dinner, playing Monty Woolley's much put-upon secretary.
Hello?
Oh, Bert, this is Maggie.
Well, Maggie, how did you know I was here?
Oh, Flash just came over the radio.
The actress was acclaimed time and again for her roles as strong, mature, and independent women. Now Voyager may well be the peak of her career, with Davis giving a remarkable performance as a spinster finding new life through love.
What is the feminine for your word? That's what I am. I knew you were married and I walked right in with my eyes wide open. I'm immune to happiness.
You weren't immune that night on the mountain.
You call that happiness?
Davis got quite a rep for often playing bitches in her movies. In typical Davis fashion, she used such commentary to get a dig in on Joan Crawford. She once said, "Why am I so good at playing bitches? I think it's because I'm not a bitch. Maybe that's why Miss Crawford always plays ladies." Over at MGM, Joan Crawford and Clark Gable were back together in Strange Cargo, an allegorical tale of redemption.
Now beat it before you get yourself a lot of grief.
Grief ain't what I came after. You got class, kid. Or is it because I haven't seen any women lately? Try that again. Because if you do, I'll break a couple of your bones. If you've got any. Let's see if you have. Now get smart.
Why don't you get smart? You know what they'll do to you.
Sure I do. But I'll take all they've got for a little of this.
When you've drifted as much as I have, you're glad to drop anchor even if it is in the mud.
Let's get back to supposing. Supposing I was the guy you were dumb enough to fall for. Then what?
Here's what.
A Woman's Face featured the glamour queen as a scarred blackmailer whose life changes when she undergoes plastic surgery.
The world was against me? All right, I'd be against it. No one could look at me without shuddering. I had no friends. I didn't think I needed any. Then I met Torsten Baring. For the first time, a man.
There have been women like you before. They became conquerors, queens, empresses.
If this operation's a success, I've created a monster. A beautiful face and no heart.
Joan's film, Reunion in France, reflected what was going on in current events, World War II.
Here is an American, a student. They speak strangely.
American.
Amidst rivalries and all-out battles all over the world, two major Hollywood forces would finally meet in 1942 when Joan took a cue from Betty and left MGM to sign with Warner Brothers. It was here she would finally do her best work. It was also here that stories of a rivalry between the two actresses began. According to Bette Davis, however, their paths seldom crossed at Warner's. Joan did request a dressing room that adjoined with Betty, though Davis never found out the reasons behind this. Apparently, Crawford greatly admired Davis and frequently asked her over for dinner. Davis would accept on behalf of her and of Beau, but Joan would reply, "If I wanted your fucking Beau to come, I'd ask him. I'm asking you." Crawford and Davis did appear in one movie together while at Warner's, though they did not share any scenes. Hollywood Canteen was an all-star gala about the famous free club run by celebrities for the servicemen during World War II. Joan appeared briefly in a humorous scene, but Betty had more screen time.
We also happen to have a man here tonight who is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, American violinists.
Aptly so, she was one of the club's founders, just part of her commitment to the war effort. Betty entertained and went a step further, urging Americans to buy war bonds.
Any bond that you or I give as a present is much more than a gift. It's a Christmas blessing to those men who will be far away on this Christmas day.
Davis continued to headline a large number of films like Watch on the Rhine, in which she and Oscar-winning Paul Lucas are pursued through Washington by Nazi agents.
The only men on earth worth their time on earth are the men who will fight for other men.
Deception cast the actress as the protege of genius composer Claude Rains. Rains' jealousy is brought to the surface when Davis falls in love with Paul Henry.
You're making a terrible mistake.
I made my mistake years ago when I first met you. You see, I thought I was buying his life.
So you betrayed me even then.
Yes, and him too. Perhaps you have some vague notion in that inflated ego of yours of abolishing it to get me back again.
If you think that, go to him. Tell him to throw the thing up himself. Tell him why.
You swine!
Though Betty had perfected her technique and famous mannerisms, these new films just didn't match her earlier works in either acclaim or popularity. Jealous Joan took the opportunity to give her derogatory view of Davis's talents. Take away the pop eyes, the cigarette, and those funny clipped words, and what have you got, she asked. She's phony, but I guess the public likes that. Crawford, on the other hand, was in the process of totally reinventing herself.
I've created a monster.
Her new on-screen persona was now an intelligent and powerful woman who could also be neurotic and even vulnerable. A series of pictures in the vein of the burgeoning film noir genre helped establish the new Joan. Among her hits in the 40s was Humoresque, where she played an unstable woman whose unhappy marriage leads her to find love with violinist John Garfield.
Don't close me out of your life, please don't. Take me into your life, Paul.
But you're married, Ellen.
We're both old enough to vote.
What can this boy give you? Suppose you do marry him. How long will it last? You know yourself better than anyone else, Helen. Can you change now?
In Possessed, she was also mentally unbalanced, as co-stars Van Heflin and Raymond Massey discovered.
What have I done?
Nothing. Nothing. Knowing you, it's been wonderful, but Louise, you hang on to me too hard.
I've never had anything in the whole world I ever wanted except you. I just can't go back being on the outside of people's lives, looking in.
He told me other things I hadn't known. About my mother.
What about her? What about your mother? What did he say? What's the matter? Don't you believe me?
No.
All right, I lied to him. It was easy. He believed me, too. What are you going to do about it?
Joan played a former carnival dancer whose attempts to start a new life in a small town are thwarted by corrupt Sheriff Sidney Greenstreet in Flamingo Road.
I'm going to crucify you. You and Dan both.
You're going to tell him it was a frame-up, that Dan is innocent. Because if you don't, I'll kill you.
Betty must have been a bit jealous over the attention Joan was getting, while her own films diminished in popularity. But Davis had 2 Oscars, while Joan had never received one, until 1945. The high point of Crawford's career is Mildred Pierce, a dark drama about a despicable daughter fully taking advantage of her mother's love. Joan played the sympathetic title role superbly, and the scene where she sees her daughter for the first time is unforgettable.
You make me feel, I don't know, warm.
And wanted.
How long has this been going on?
Monty's going to divorce you and marry me. And there's nothing you can do about it.
At the Academy Awards, she finally took home the Best Actress Oscar. The 2 Hollywood rivals were now equals. Interestingly, both Bette Davis and Joan Crawford are often portrayed as arrogant and sometimes difficult. Arlene Dahl recalls an incident at a dinner party that forever soured her view of Joan Crawford.
I was lucky enough the second week while I was making a screen test for Jack Warner, I was lucky enough to be invited to a dinner party that was given by Sir Charles and Elsie Mendel. I remember being introduced to Joan Crawford. Now, I was tongue-tied, but I finally got out. I blurted out in my innocence. I was barely 18. Should have known better, though. I said, "Oh, Miss Crawford, you're my mother's favorite actress." And I saw her face drop. And I said, and my mother, and mine too, but I said it too late, because from then on, it started a feud that went on for 18 years. And I noticed that Joan Crawford was giving me these icy stares, you know, and these dagger looks, while her companion that she insisted always to be seated next to, Greg Boutzer, was winking at me and making very flattering remarks across the table with me. Well, it came time for people to make toast. Joan took up her glass of red wine, and while she was making the toast, she lost control of the glass, and it went all over my white satin gown, which was ruined. Joan Fontaine got up at that moment, and she said, "You bitch, you did that on purpose."
But Joan also had a streak of kindness that many overlook. Gloria DeHaven speaks fondly of the actress in this exclusive interview.
You should lower your voice, your speaking voice. And I said, how? I mean, why does one, and how would, I was dumbfounded. She said, well, just speak aloud at home, wherever you are, use your voice.
Yes.
She said, read everything aloud and lower it and lower it and lower it. And I said, well, how do I do that? She said, well, start up with your normal voice, then take it a step down.
Right.
As if you were saying, hello there, hello there, hello there, hello there, till you can finally do it no more. And I said, well, what'll I read? She said, the phone book. It doesn't matter. She said, just keep doing it. I did that, and it really improved my singing voice. It improved my speaking voice.
Really?
Yes, I had a much higher pitched little girl voice, I guess, you know. And, oh, she was so wonderful to me. And years after, anytime she saw me, I remember being in a restaurant many years later in New York, and she made a point of coming across. I saw her, and I would have gone to her, but before I could go to her, she came across the room and said, I told you something was going to happen to you. And she said, look what's happened. She said, isn't it terrific? And she was wonderful. So I like somebody out there to hear that there was a good thing about Joan Crawford. Everything that was
great
mentioned.
actress. Great
She was
actress.
a
wonderful actress.
Bette Davis was also not the easiest person to work with and intimidated many who crossed her path. Though she did say about herself, I'm the nicest goddamn dame that ever lived. But as June Allison recalls, getting to know the star often proved the rumors wrong.
A lady who used to intimidate me all of my lifetime. I was terrified of Miss Bette Davis.
Yeah.
And we shared the same dressing room. She is the most delightful, wonderful woman I have ever met. She's just right out straight.
By the end of the 40s, both Joan Crawford and Bette Davis found their careers sagging quite low. The two also left Warner Brothers, Bette in 1948 and Joan in 1951. Davis made a comeback with the hit All About Eve, giving a stunning performance as stage star Margot Channing. Appearing alongside Ann Baxter, George Sanders, and young Marilyn Monroe, Davis based her performance on Tallulah Bankhead and uttered the famous line, "Fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy night."
She's a girl of so many interests.
Pretty rare quality these days.
A girl of so many rare qualities.
So she seemed.
So you've pointed out so often. So many qualities so often. Her loyalty, efficiency, devotion, warmth, and affection, and so young. So young and so fair. Eve, my understudy.
Didn't you know?
Of course I knew.
Just slipped your mind.
Find out.
Only thing. What I go after, I want to go after. I don't want it to come after me.
Don't get up. And please stop acting as if I were the Queen Mother. I'm sorry, I didn't mean...
Outside of a beehive, Margot, your behavior would hardly be considered either queenly or motherly.
You're in a beehive, pal, didn't you know? We're all busy little bees, full of stings, making honey day and night. Aren't we, honey?
The success of All About Eve kept Davis working strongly for the next few years in films like The Virgin Queen, where she played Elizabeth I.
Thank God you are no longer of mine. Out of me sight. Out of me house! His dirty little lovemaking with a girl who owes me loyalty.
That's reason enough for a man to die?
It is reason enough for two to die. Raleigh and his wench.
And Storm Center, which found the actress as a librarian accused of being a communist.
You're not my friend.
Freddie.
You're not anybody's friend. They kicked you out. They found out about you. You don't belong here. You're not the librarian anymore. You're a communist. The communist. The communist. The communist.
Stop it. 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 Stop it.
Joan was not so lucky, but she never stopped working. In Goodbye, My Fancy, Crawford was cast as a congresswoman meeting up with an old flame.
You see, you learn all kinds of cute tricks in my work.
You realize, of course, a scandal would end your career, too.
I'm perfectly willing to take that chance. You just can't take it, can you, Matt? That he could be more exciting, more desirable than you.
That's right. I'm as vain as the next guy.
Since you've gone in for collecting memories, here's another one.
She was her typical tough girl self in This Woman is Dangerous, where she must overcome multiple hardships in her search for true love.
This is something you don't lie about.
That guy in Miami was something you don't lie about either.
Yes, and remember the guy in Chicago and the guy in New York? And a lot of guys have looked at me.
But audiences were just not impressed. Method actors like Marlon Brando and James Dean were the new favorites, and has-beens like Joan Crawford just weren't acceptable. Actress Beverly Garland shares her viewpoints on actors showing their age.
Some of these kids today that are doing a television show and are making 100, 200, 300,000, and maybe Seinfeld kids will make $1 million, I don't know. They have now offered them 300,000. What is so interesting to me is that no one thinks they're ever going to get old. No one thinks that they're not going to be up for everything wonderful. No one thinks it will ever be over. They can't conceive of that, you know. I think as a child growing up, I never dreamed that Bette Davis would get old. Bette Davis would always be Bette Davis. And she would always play with George Brent. And she would always do the movies that I happen to love. She would never get old. She did, you know. But kids today, and kids for centuries, never believe that. You know, they never think that's ever going to happen to them. I mean, they're always going to be beautiful. They're always going to have great figures. They're always going to be sought after. And they're always going to have people saying, oh, yes, you are. Oh, yes, you are. Oh, yes, you are. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. Yes, 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 yes.
By the end of the decade, Bette Davis was in the same boat as Joan Crawford. Even her role in Frank Capra's final film, A Pocket Full of Miracles, was meant for Helen Hayes.
A nickel! Thank you, Mr. Rockefeller!
Could the careers of these two great actresses actually be finished? Not on your life. Along came director Robert Aldrich and his plans to make a gothic horror film about two faded Hollywood stars. The title was Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? The film is practically a black comedy, with Betty as Baby Jane Hudson, a demented former child star dreaming of a comeback. Crawford is her sister, another former actress crippled by an accident and confined to a wheelchair. Betty spends her days tormenting Joan and keeping her trapped in their old house. The film is intensely suspenseful, yet has no blood or gore. The terror comes from watching these old women go crazy. Apparently, Crawford read the novel by Henry Farrell and sent it to Aldrich with the idea that she and Davis would play the sisters.
Bette Davis is Jane Hudson. Joan Crawford is Blanche Hudson. But we must warn you, if you're long-standing fans of Miss Davis and Miss Crawford, this motion picture is quite unlike anything they have ever done. It is a bold essay in the art of the macabre, a venture to the ultimate reaches of terror. A motion picture definitely not for the squeamish. And we beg you, as the tension builds to the screaming point, as shock after shock assaults your senses, try to remember that this is only a motion picture. Try and remember.
Get away from me! Away from me!
Joan told Davis about it, visiting her backstage while Betty was doing Night of the Iguana on Broadway. According to reports, Joan and Betty never fought on the set, though they remained a bit icy towards each other. Joan was shocked at the over-the-top makeup Betty was wearing as Baby Jane. And Betty was annoyed by Joan's resistance to looking less glamorous. Betty reported that Joan, who had married the head of Pepsi-Cola, liked to spike her soft drink with vodka. She also teased Joan a lot about her line readings and her wardrobe.
I must say I was floored.
The film, which no studio wanted to touch, was eventually a huge hit, re-establishing the box office power of Davis and Crawford. Betty was even nominated for an Academy Award, which angered Joan, who actively campaigned against her.
She's not worth it. childish, empty-headed little tramp.
She was certainly happy when Davis did not win. Robert Aldrich's own follow-up to Jane was Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte in 1965, in which he upped the terror quotient with more gore. The film was also meant to re-team Davis and Crawford, but to many it seemed Bette wanted to get Joan off the project as quickly as possible. Davis did not feel Crawford was right for the part and was still angry over Joan's attitude toward the Oscar nomination. From the start, Bette said she would not appear in any shots with Joan. Crawford was also treated shabbily while trying to do publicity for the film and soon developed a sudden illness in order to leave the picture. Olivia de Havilland was cast in place of Joan, with Agnes Moorehead and Mary Astor added in to up the old lady quotient.
I won't turn on the light. Come along.
He's dead! He's dead!
The film, about a woman haunted by the murder of her beau years earlier, was another hit. Davis continued working from that point on, often appearing in more horror pictures. The Nanny for Hammer had her cast as a mentally unstable governess attempting to murder her charges.
Huh? What happened in the bathroom, Nanny? I'm sure I don't know what you mean.
Actress Pamela Franklin recalls working with the great lady.
She was a trooper. True, I mean, the word professional. Always on time, never late, never complained. She had a very, very bad back problem, and she never complained about it. She wore a back brace, and there was a scene where she had to take the child out of the bathtub, and she's trying to, and I'm not talking about a baby, I'm talking about, well, a large boy. And she had a special harness they'd built around him, but as well as her back. And she insisted on doing it herself. They kept saying, well, we can get a double in, you know, we can shoot. No, 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 she said. She was a lady.
Davis's film roles ranged from the respected to the challenging to the outright bizarre. But through it all, she remained the great Bette Davis with her own way of looking at things. Ron Howard, who directed her in a TV movie, shares a delightful anecdote about the actress.
In the phone conversations that we had where we would be talking about the script and everything, she would kept referring to me as Mr. Howard. Well, I think we should do this, Mr. Howard. And of course, I called her Miss Davis, but I said, after a while, why don't you please just call me Ron?
Yeah.
She said, no, I'll call you Mr. Howard until I decide whether I like you or not. On the first day of filming, it was Miss Davis, and she was calling me Mr. Howard again. But things went very well, and the day ended, and I said, well, you're finished, Miss Davis. I'll see you tomorrow. She said, okay, Ron. Gave me a little pat on the rump and went walking away, and made me feel really, really good.
Bette once said about herself, I have been uncompromising, peppery, intractable, monomaniacal, tactless, volatile, and oft-times disagreeable. I suppose I'm larger than life. She was. Her legend continued to grow as she got older, but as she liked to say, old age is no place for sissies. This was not lost on her greatest rival for the spotlight. Joan Crawford also continued working, but in B films and low-grade schlock.
You're a riffraff and so am I.
Appearing almost exclusively in horror pictures, she did some films for master showman William Castle, who toned down his usual ballyhoo to suit the stature of his star. Straight Jacket cast Joan as a former axe murderer trying to start a new life.
Leave me alone! You let go of me! Listen to me!
While I Saw What You Did put her in the center of a tale about two teens causing trouble on the telephone.
I saw what you did, and I know who you are.
Suzette, I want to meet you anywhere you say.
Who is Suzette?
Get off my back!
She's not worth it. You married a childish, empty-headed little tramp.
Berserk found her under the big top as the ringmaster of a circus plagued by horrible murders.
It's becoming a nightmare. I keep wondering and thinking, who's next?
And her final film, Trog, cast her as a scientist trying to communicate and train a savage and shabby-looking Neanderthal.
Please try to describe it.
Like nothing I've ever seen before.
You're the only one who saw it and survived. Whatever it is, it must exist. It's still there, trapped.
Joan Crawford died in 1977 in New York, New York. Bette Davis died in France in 1989. Both remarkable ladies continued working up to the end. But neither ever seemed to have a content family life. Rona Barrett, who interviewed both women, talks about their life choices.
I think the most poignant thing that I remember Bette Davis ever saying was that she felt she had failed at her marriages and that she wished she could have had one marriage in particular that would have really lasted a long time. But her career and all that that represented always took precedent over the rest.
Each actress had let their careers dominate their lives, relishing their stardom and talent. To some extent, they may have neglected their children, though these Christmas images paint a different picture. Similarly, both women became the subjects of scathing books by their own children. Davis's daughter, B.D., wrote My Mother's Keeper while her mom was still alive, complaining about growing up in the famous actress's shadow. But the star, ever graceful, forgave her daughter in her own autobiography, This and That. More brutal was the earlier book written by Christina Crawford after her mother's death, Mommy Dearest. The work became even more famous after it was made into a movie with Faye Dunaway portraying Joan. The book and the film depict Crawford as a domineering woman on the brink of insanity, with fanatical views on such everyday items as wire hangers.
What's wire hangers doing in this closet when I told you no wire hangers ever?
Yes, Mommy dearest.
Fashion expert Mr. Blackwell is adamant over how he stands on the issue.
Who was Joan Crawford? Joan was Mildred Pierce. Think of it. And as far as hitting the kid and all of that mommy dearest garbage, she was tough. I'm sure she rapped the kid once or twice. I don't think she ever beat up the kid.
Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, even after death, they are remembered as rivals. And Bette did make it clear how she felt about Joan.
You're everything that's repulsive to me.
Certainly, Joan Crawford did not hide the fact that she admired Davis and respected her talent. But Joan was no slouch herself, as proven in films like Mildred Pierce and Humoresque. The rivalry between these two women goes beyond just glamour versus talent. Their rivalry comes from the fact that both had achieved the highest possible stardom they could reach in Hollywood. Both rank as two of the greatest actresses to ever appear before the camera. Both are immortals of the silver screen, destined to forever play out the competitions envisioned by once and future fans who cannot help but be enthralled by these classic Hollywood rivals.